Perfect. All right. Hey, everyone. What's going on? Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever the heck you are, whatever you're doing. I'm delighted that you're here. So, hey, can you really believe that somebody wrote a book called Built to Suck? That's pretty freaking awesome. And today we get to talk to Joseph Jaffe. It's his fifth book. The book is called Built to Suck, The Inevitable Demise of the Corporation and How to Save It. I want to talk all about it. So the great news is whether you're a David, right, taking down Goliath like you're a startup or an entrepreneur, a small business owner, or you are a Goliath, right, those big mega corporation people preventing the inevitable, worrying about how to save your job, how to save your company, this is for you. Of course, there's messages that we're going to talk about failure, risk, embracing your heresy, and navigating the journey to survival. Because, hey, we're all in the survival business nowadays. Now, if you don't know Joe Jaffe, boy, you are missing out. He's a multiple author, a serial entrepreneur, one of the most sought-after consultants, speakers, and thought leaders on marketing, innovation, and change. And he calls himself the Admiral at the HMS Beagle, which I think is really cool. They're a strategic consultancy that helps its clients navigate the journey to survival. Because again, hey, we're all in survival business. Now in 2019, he joined West Virginia University's Reed College of Media as an instructor in the Integrated Marketing Communications online graduate program. And he's going to lecture on a new course he created on disruptive innovation. And today he's here to talk to us. So Joe, what's up, man?
That was the best introduction ever.
Oh, thanks.
And while you were doing that, perfect timing because I've gone ahead and shared this live recording on my Facebook, and so hopefully it's all working now.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And no echo. That's great. So cool, man. So, hey, I got to ask you, you've been on the internet a long time since you had Jaffe Juice. That's how I got started knowing you. And now I get to talk to you about all the cool stuff you're working on. But how did you get started, man, on this whole crazy internet thing?
So I guess right at the beginning, I'm from South Africa originally, and I worked for a fast food chicken company called Nando's Chickenland, the taste of Portugal. And it was at that time I was I was the third marketing employee in the company's history. And I've always lived technology and lived the internet, the early days of the internet. I helped put the brand on the web. And, I always like to say that Nando's understood what interactivity was before interactivity existed, right? Interactivity is how to interact with your customers and how to be responsive. And it taught me a lot of best practices. And, then I came to the US about 22 years ago. I worked for a number of agencies and really right at the end, my last paying job was 2002, where I ran interactive media for, in fact, the agency where the founder of the company said the quotes, "Let's see how big we get before we suck," or a version of that. And that became, who knew that so many years later, that would become the inspiration for my book. But, when I left Shy Day in 2002, I started a roadshow called The Battle for the Heart, and the A of heart was capitalized. And I believed then that, the whole interactive space was so dominated by left brain, analytical, performance-based science, which is great, but there was this whole other side to it, the creative side, the surprise and delight, the art side. And so I've been an evangelist for digital and then social and mobile and startups and apps and innovation, emerging technology. To me, it's all just a continuous thread that says technology has forever changed the way that we live our lives, the way we go to market, the way we interact with our customers, the way we transform businesses.
Wow. That's... You're pretty prescient, man. You figured this stuff out very early because a lot of people, to your point, right, they wanted to game the search engines. They wanted to beat the algorithms, all that. Those big data people, really, they did their best to kind of remove the human from the social side and automate. Let's see how much crap we can fling out there. And yet you really flipped that over. I mean, you wrote the book, Flip the Funnel, gosh, a long time ago now, that really changed the game. So is that where you started realizing that the funnel had changed, that really where you are is really kind of, truly ahead of the game, man. You are ahead of this for so many.
I appreciate you mentioning that, but someone once told me, he said there are two types of people, pioneers and settlers. And he said, pioneers get shot and settlers take the land. He said, you're a pioneer. And I said, thanks, I think, so being ahead of the curve, certainly has its advantages and disadvantages. But I got to tell you, it's so funny that talking about Flip the Funnel as being ahead of the curve. It's the 10-year anniversary of being able to say, wait a second, if 80% of your revenue comes from your repeat, returning, recurring, loyal customers, why are you spending less than 20% of your dollars against them, right? And then on top of that, and certainly the B2B world knows this, 80% of those, of the revenue that comes from your recurring, repeat, returning, loyal customers are coming from 20% of those customers. So it's these two massive disconnects or disproportionate relationships. And listen, this is just common sense. This goes back to the beginning of time. And I think you alluded to this point earlier. The key here is the key here is balance. The key here is equilibrium. The key is how to join forces, right? Humanity and technology. And that's why, I talk about in Built to Suck, in the chapter on customer obsession, there's a little section that says there is no A or I in customer, but perhaps there should be. And that's where I talk about AI. And I actually say, AI has 3 different components: the crawl, walk, run. There's automation, there's augmentation, and there's auguration. We are calling it AI, but we really are just, you nailed it, right? We're just in the automation phase, and we're not doing it for the right reasons. We're not really doing it to make our customers' lives better, like being a toll booth operator, for example. We're just doing it so we can save ourselves money. It's all about cost cutting. It's all about laziness, replacing, menial workers with machines. That's not AI. That's not customer service. That's not customer experience, and that's not customer obsession either.
Well, I would say it's not even customer interest. Let's be really clear.
Yeah.
It's almost like customer disinterest. It's like, oh, well, if the customers didn't stop, if they would just stop calling, wouldn't life be easier? So why don't we give them a menu they can never navigate through? Why don't we give them a website with infinite possibilities and no clear call to action that's just going to piss them off and drive them away?
It's incredible to me how companies have tried so hard to strip out the human and humanity and just, the FAQs and the IVR world. But I'll tell you, and I talk about this in the book and certainly in all my presentations as well. Look at Apple, right? Apple is the quintessential example of swimming against the current. When companies are going out of business left, right, and center, when they're closing down their bricks and mortar stores, when they're firing humans, Apple's buying prime real estate, in Grand Central, at the Louvre, and they're hiring more people. And Apple is one of those companies. You can get hold of a human being. Try it if you haven't tried it. I'm not saying you, but people watching or listening. It's incredible to see how quickly you can get hold of a human being, and they will take down your details. They'll even give you their phone number and their email address. And that, again, is that rocket science, right? Or is it just common sense?
I think it's common sense. And to your point, just for fun, I went to their website, and they have a link to phone numbers. That's fascinating because to exactly what you said, man, so many people are hiding behind it. They're hiding behind, just use the form. So many people don't want to use the form. If I'm on my phone, I want to talk to a person, or I want the choice at least to talk to a person, right? I think that's the key is we need to take the power back as consumers and say, well, I'd like some choice here, and this is what I prefer.
And that is the exact lens that companies should be thinking of when they consider a voice-first strategy, thinking about smart devices and IoT and chatbots, rather than letting the technology, tactics in search of strategy or solutions to non-existent problems. Rather, they should be thinking of a customer-centric, customer-first approach. And if it doesn't make sense, and if it doesn't really add value, then why the hell are they even moving in that direction?
Boy, that is a really good question. Why do they move that in that direction then? You say right that if they're built to suck, do they just have to go in that direction? Is it just too much inertia, Joe, or what? Why is that? Is there nobody at the top that's a human?
Well, there are a couple of things. I mean, I frame it in a bunch of ways. One way is to say that the business model of business is broken. It's flawed, right? The very thing that helped these companies grow and become these behemoths, these multinational blue chip corporations. And what is that thing? Size, scale, economies of scale, having global networks and resources. It is the very single biggest factor and contributor to their demise, the albatross around their neck. There's so much overhead. They move too slow. They're too dysfunctional. They're too siloed. They're too risk averse. They're slowing down when the world is speeding up. You know, that old quote, right, which is, I'd rather beg for forgiveness than ask for permission. Try and implement that cultural idea inside a large corporation. It's almost impossible. So part of the problem, again, you know, going back to that idea of Jay Shyatt saying, let's see how big we can get before we go bad, before we suck. It is this idea that it is inevitable that companies will you can resist the urge to suck for just so long. And then at that point, you know, it's kind of fast track to what I call the corporate apocalypse.
Well, that's interesting. So did you have any pushback like from anybody who said, you can't say suck, Joe? That's a dirty word, right? Although we do see now books with the F-bomb right in the cover or other stuff. I mean, what was going on when you decided that it was going to be okay to say suck?
Well, you know, again, it came from that quote. But, you know, here's what I was asked once, which is, why not call the company Built to Fail? And, you know, I looked at it and I said to myself, you know what? Failure is too good for you. It's too good a word to associate with corporations, because if we've learned anything from the small business world, what I call the entrepreneurial revolution, the startup world, it's that failure is part and parcel. It's almost a rite of passage in a sense. And so to bring this word and associate it with companies was almost doing it a disservice, because if we've learned anything, it's that, you know, the art of the pivot, the ability to learn from one's mistakes, but not be afraid ultimately to fail. So Built to Fail was a safety net. It was almost hedging in a sense. Built to Suck, you know, as I say, the key to success is to suck less. And my response is without trying to be flippant, is seriously, if your biggest problem is that you're afraid of the word suck, you've got a lot bigger fish to fry, my friend. You know, so it's kind of like a little provocative. It's taken the battle to the front lines, but honestly, right now, there's a bigger challenge, and that challenge is, as you alluded to in your intro, survival. Because, you know, I'll tell you something, you know, companies and startups, again, they get that. They get that the idea that it's here today, gone tomorrow. You know, you've heard the phrase death by 100 cuts or 1,000 cuts. You know, I talk about death by 1,000 budget cuts, because that's what's happening in the organizational world right now. These guys are dying, and the problem is most of them don't even realize it. The whole boiling frog syndrome. So you got to get their attention somehow, like take them by the throat.
I dig it. Yeah, well, you definitely can bleed to death by not paying attention to what's going on in your organization. So I think, yeah, suck absolutely makes a ton of sense here. But you didn't go with a traditional publisher this time. I mean, you went with Idea Press, Rohit Bhargava's company, Idea Press. So what was behind that? I mean, that's an interesting decision to go for a book, and by interesting, we could go a million directions, but why did you pick Idea Press?
You know, I'll just be very, very direct and clear about it, because, you know, the same reason why Rohit started Idea Press is the same reason that I went with Idea Press. Talk about companies that are built to suck. Now, this is not a slight against the company that published my first 4 books, which is John Wiley & Sons. But for the most part, the traditional publishing industry, and that doesn't just include books, it includes magazines, it includes newspapers, talk about being built to suck. That industry is built to suck. You know, I I talk about this idea of embracing your heresy in the book. And one of the heresies is, what if you gave away your product for free and still no one wanted it? That is called the newspaper business today, and even the magazine business, and even the book business as well. So what's really happened is the economics and the business model of the book publishing industry is so broken, and it's never gonna get fixed. So, unless it's a sure thing, right? Unless you're Michelle Obama or anyone who worked for the White House, basically, unless there is a guarantee of a certain amount of installed sales, the traditional publishers are not going to get behind you. They're not going to offer the marketing support, and they're not going to give you what you want. Now, on the flip side, you've got the self-publishing business. And that's just as broken, but for different reasons as well. It's, it was going to take an entrepreneur or a challenger to come in and say, why don't we create a service first, a professional, an experience first self-publishing solution? Now, Rohit came in and he said, why can't we get the best of both worlds? So find a self-publishing business model, but with the same professionalism and service that you would get from the traditional space. And that's what kind of that middle ground that I ended up wanting to choose.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's a great kind of middle ground, to your point, for authors who are looking for maximum control, but I would say also maximum kind of white glove treatment, because Rohit and his team do a terrific job of putting that together, making sure that you get what you want out of your book, as long as you have a clear path for what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, and it's less about promoting the book, but this is the book. I got it. I've had it for less than a week, and it's beautiful. And it actually, the cover is glossy, and I looked at the paper stock, and I'm just really, really in love with the finished product, even compared to some of my other books, my first 4.
Fantastic! Wow. That's pretty cool. So on Built to Suck, let's transition. Let's talk more about the book here. Sure. But I'd be remiss if I didn't ask that question about Rohit and Idea Press. But on your website, on builttosuck.com, and your bonus content, I think it's fascinating that you've got 2 little Venmo experiments. But who is Lyndell Westbrook, and why is your goal to make Lyndell a millionaire?
So, and you're the first person to talk about him, so which is awesome. So I was in Philly for a wedding on Labor Day, and I went to, I think it's called the Independence Beer Hall, and I'd had a couple of beers too many, and it was time to go to the toilet. I have a lot of potty talk and a lot of a P-type humor. You'll notice that in the book. But anyway, I digress. And so I went into it was like kind of in a little mobile caravan, like a little mobile home. And there was a bathroom attendant, as you've seen many times. He's got the cologne, he's got the, he's got the scented towels, he's got the mints, etc. Maybe some condoms, I don't know. But instead of, there was the little basket with cash, but then I noticed a sign on the door, on the wall, and it said, Venmo me. And I think he's A1 bathroom. Is that right?
That's right.
And I was like, this guy's on Venmo. This guy gets it. This guy is an innovator when so many companies probably don't even know what Venmo is, or even if Venmo, worse still, imagine Venmo actually impacts their business directly or indirectly, and they've either never heard of it, or they haven't experimented with it, or what if they'd started it, or maybe they should have bought it, or could they have invested in it? And so I thought to myself, wouldn't it be cool to actually, now reading my book, that I discovered Lyndell, who is an innovator, who is more of an innovator than most marketing people out there in leadership positions. And I was like, read this book, send him $1. If for no other reason, then you're not on Venmo, and therefore you should get on Venmo, you should download it, you should, register and send him $1. And wouldn't it be amazing if we could turn him into a millionaire? Create this little pay it forward approach. So there's no skin in the game. He doesn't know to this day who I am, but I did send him $1, and he liked my post, and it just would make me the happiest guy in the world if we could all share this and turn him into a millionaire. Wow. Amazing. And by the way, I'm also a businessman, so I said, you know what, while you're at it, send me $1 on Venmo, or give me a tip, or send me, anything that based on the value that this book brings to you. And I'll give you a shout out on Twitter or Instagram if you like, based on your dollar. So there's also a little opportunity as well for people, for me to give them a shout out. So we'll see what happens. Maybe nothing, but again, isn't that the point, right? The point is put yourself out there, experiment, have fun, take a chance, see what happens. You never know what might transpire.
Absolutely. No, and I think that's super nice that you really have no way of tracking how many people actually give $1 to a one bathroom. Right? I mean, It's not like you don't have his account. This isn't one of your buddies. This is no publicity stunt. This is just you being an altruistic guy and experimenting and seeing what's going to happen.
It's the same reason why, I've developed a proprietary canvas, built on the same principles and Creative Commons practices of the business plan and lean canvas. And I created one called the survival planning canvas. And you know what? It's available as well for download for free. It's in the book. It's available for free rather than create a means of registering, a lead gen registration. Sometimes you've just got to kind of like put it out there and just give to the universe, and hopefully you'll get something back in return.
Absolutely. I was actually, that was going to be my next question here, because I'm clicking around on the website and I see your survival planning canvas that has no registration. That's just super duper there as a PDF, can print it out. I mean, frankly, I don't even see a copyright on this here, Joe. What's going to happen, man? You think nobody's going to rip you off? What's the thought here?
You know what? Let them try and rip me off, because I mean, good luck to them. The whole idea is, implicit in the value exchange is that my company, the HMS Beagle, conducts these workshops that we call voyages, where the canvas is inextricably part of this. There's a lot more IP as well, and it's one of those things that listen. It could be said about anything. Why go to a restaurant when you can just cook at home, right? I mean, why do anything? Why hire an agency when you can create an in-house agency? Well, guess what? That's a big trend today. Everyone's trying to do that in-house. It will never work. It can never work, because you have to, honor and respect the subject matter expert, someone who is an artisan, a craftsman at what they do. And it's their day job in a sense. There's that old saying, which is, if you try and be all things to all people, you end up being nothing to nobody. And so part of the approach is just go out there and you know what, if I have a mission, my mission is let's try and save some of these, behemoths, these Fortune 500 or Global 2000 companies. But for the rest of them, the ones that get offended with the word suck, they're going to go the same way that Sears is gone, that Payless is gone, that Toys R Us is gone, that Kodak is gone, that Blockbuster's gone, that BlackBerry's gone, and so on and so forth.
Awesome. Love it. Totally agree with you. I think that's good reminder that doing it yourself is not the same as having an expert do it for you. That's so important, right? An expert chef, Bobby Flay, is always going to cook better than me, even if we have the same exact ingredients. I think that's a good lesson, Joe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm the Bobby Flay of marketing. No, I don't know.
There you go. Well, I guess that makes me to me, huh?
I actually like to call myself the Robin Hood of marketing. I love stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. But whatever works, whatever floats your boat.
Well, speaking about your boat, your metaphor for a ship is really fun with the HMS Beagle. And in the book, you talk about heresy. Well, what is heresy, and why is this such an important topic for business owners?
Right, and the part of that idea is walking the plank. So I was at a conference years and years ago, and I saw an environmentalist who spoke about this idea of embrace your heresy. I don't even think he said that. He mentioned the word heresy, or like, don't be afraid to face your fears. And it connected so strongly with me that I started building thought leadership and a real philosophy around it. And so the idea is, be prepared to face your deepest, darkest fears, because when you do that, when that 800-pound gorilla in the room, or that elephant in the room maybe is the better analogy, that's when you kind of discover rebirth, right, or reinvention or transformation. And so I came up with 10 of these heresies, and they include, what if you put yourself out of business? That's the most obvious one, right? Start a cannibalistic product or service or solution inside your company, and of course, like, how can you lose? Because first of all, if it doesn't work out, well, at least you tried it, and that there's no there. But if it does, and it actually puts the cash cow out of business, well, how can you, again, it's, you add the two together, you're still a winner. And this, to give you a real analogy, think about how magazines could have benefited if they had just embraced online and recognized, even though digital was cannibalizing print, we're all, everyone was on the same team. And so ultimately it all went into the same P&L at the end of the day. Another one is this idea of, what if you funded your competitor? And I give the example of how Apple opened up their whole iPod ecosystem to Microsoft. It actually helped put Microsoft Zune out of business, which actually saved Microsoft billions of dollars that they were flushing down the toilet. And I'll give you one more. What if you slaughtered the cash cow? Netflix, when they shipped their billionth DVD, they basically shut it down almost overnight, and they moved 100%, all systems go into streaming as well. So this idea of if you embrace your heresy, you will discover and define your legacy. Some of these ideas are pretty radical, like this idea of McDonald's admitting that they're, contributing to obesity and child obesity. I even come up with the idea of, what if McDonald's had a scale in their fast food outlets where you actually had to walk through the scale in order to get to the cash register? These are radical ideas. But again, Coke and Pepsi and Snapple, they kind of all, Dr. Pepper, they all joined forces to kind of recognize, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so in this case, they all had to come together and play nice with one another to recognize, if people continue to get fatter and fatter and fatter as they are, it's not just the schools that are outlawing soda machines. It's going to be every single institution. And so this, I could have written the entire book on this idea of embrace your heresy. And I promise you, this chapter in of itself is mind-blowing and game-changing.
Wow. So much there, man. So much there about thinking about how to put yourself out of business and walk your own plank and find your heresy, which is so, that's revolutionary. And yet when you think about it, if you're not thinking about it, your competition probably is. Yeah.
And that's, you just nailed it, because there are two things that come out of it. One is, you come up with all these ideas as part of the workshop, right? Again, someone can download that PDF and do it themselves. But part of the workshops we do is to actually do a whole design sprint to come up with those ideas. And then we say two things. One is, some of these ideas I'm sure are crap, but some of them are like incredible. And so the whole idea is, number one, if the idea is so awesome, why aren't you doing it? But the second part of that, the real rub is how is it even conceivable that no one else has thought of this idea before you? We learn this from the startup world, right? Which is every idea being thought of at any given point in time. There are at least 3 to 5 entrepreneurs that are doing the same idea, that are further down the road. And even in some cases, the idea is better. If the idea isn't better, they're executing it better. So speed to market and first move advantage count. And so the whole idea is, if you've come up with such a great idea, get another horse in the game. Have 2 horses in the race. You've just exponentially boosted your chances of winning it.
Interesting. Instead of riding one horse until it dies, get a second horse, and maybe you can make them both last a little longer. That's it. That's interesting. That's a very interesting philosophy, man. Yeah, I like that.
Very rich one, right? We could talk about beating a dead horse. We can talk about taking a horse to water. I feel like there's a collaboration between you and I.
There you go.
In the future.
Yeah.
Mule marketing.
Built to ride horses. There we go. Perfect. So,
built to ride.
Perfect. I'll buy the domain right now, Joe. So cool,
maybe
man.
I already have.
Oh. I didn't know you were thinking about collaborating this early. Wow.
Actually, I knew when Built to Suck, when I realized it was available, I was like, it was meant to be. I'm not changing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the subtitle is The Inevitable Demise of the Corporation and How to Save It. So can they be saved, Joe? Is there something besides walking the plank that you would tell a company, a corporation, a business owner right now so that they can suck less and see some success?
Well, you will notice in the subhead, let's see if I can get this on properly, that there is a question mark. And so the inevitable demise of the corporation, how to save it, with a question mark. And my point in this book is, again, not trying to be controversial for provocative for the sake, but I don't know. Look, this isn't a fairy tale. There is no happy ending necessarily. I'm not sure that corporations can be saved because ultimately they are their own worst enemy. They cannot get out of their way. There's so much thinking about change, right? But I always love this one, right? Which is change happens when the pain of not changing is greater than the pain of changing. There's a lot of pain going on right now. And for the most part, a lot of people running these organizations are counting down the days until they, evacuate with that golden parachute, and retire. Rashad Tabakawala, who has been a mentor and a role model for me. He very kindly endorsed the book as well. He once said, people said, well, what's it going to take? And he said, death. He said, we need to basically, if not kill them off, just allow them to die, because that old God has to die and has to, there needs to be a changing of the God. And I'm not sure that I would necessarily be that extreme, but what I would say is that, the writing is on the wall. And the data is incredible, right? We've seen companies' lifespan drop from 75 to 15 years in just 50 years. We've seen the fact that, and I have a ton of anecdotal evidence, but I also have amassed what I believe is an unprecedented amount of empirical evidence documenting, 51% of Fortune 500 companies have had declining revenues over the past 3 years on average. So when 1 in every 2 of the largest corporations in the world are registering these declining revenues, what's going to create that turnaround, that return to growth? And the answer is, look, I've come up with 4 pillars: with digital disruption, with customer obsession, with talent resurrection, and corporate citizenship. Is it possible, if a company does all 4 and truly hits them all out the park, that they will survive and thrive? Yes, of course it is. It's almost a guarantee. But what are the odds of that actually happening? I'm sorry to say, I'm not that hopeful.
Ooh, that's interesting. Very, very interesting. Not sure if corporations are going to make it. That's an interesting thought, Joe. So, and I did notice on the cover there is a question mark. So, folks, if you want to learn more about this question mark and this provocative guy, Joe Jaffe, go to builttosuck.com. Check out his book. Download his pillars. Donate $1 to A1 Bathroom, Lyndell Westbrook. Make him a millionaire, or give Joe $1. If you get the book and you get extra value, right, make him a millionaire. So, Joe, any last final words here? I'm going to let you have the final say here.
Yeah, well, remember that whole the tagline, right? The key to success is to suck less. There are ways to start, right? Oftentimes people say, what should I do first? What should I do next? How do I sell this through? Who's doing a good job? What's the next big thing? I've addressed all 3 of those questions in the book. But ultimately, even that notion of just sucking a little bit less is a good start and a good step in the right direction. I want to just leave you with this thought, right? Which is, and I draw the analogy between the corporate empire. If the corporation were a civilization, ultimately, the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Ming Dynasty, Nazi Germany, and there's a chart that shows this, even at the bottom right, is America. Every single civilization has risen and fallen. Most of the time, hubris was the number 1 contributor to the demise. It is almost impossible to cheat the sands of time. And if it is true that the corporation could be looked at as a civilization or an empire, then surely the demise and the outcome is absolutely known and inevitable. So, Charles Darwin, he said, it is not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but rather the one that is the most adaptable to change. The goal is change or be forever changed in the worst possible way. So, there's the line in the sand. There's that stake in the ground. It's time for us to get going. And that's why you can't have little registrations and lead gen for people to download a survival canvas. We're all in this together. And so we need to figure out a way to work together and collaborate in order to save the corporation, or just let it die a miserable, gruesome, painful death.
Wow. Well, that's heartening, Joe. Thanks, buddy. That's really good. But hopefully we can.
Yeah, I think it's optimistic. I'm happy. I think if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a small business, if you're a startup, it's good news. Maybe if you work for a company and you want to be that change agent, I think it could be good news. It's not meant to be. It's not meant to be miserable. I'll tell you one thing. When we looked at the cover, this cover was designed by design crowd. So I also went to the crowd. There were two versions of this. One, the sky was all orange, right? It looked very apocalyptic in a sense. But I wanted this to be almost like a scene from The Walking Dead, right? The birds are chirping, the sky is blue, all the stuff is cleared. And yes, there are zombies, walking the earth, and there is a graveyard, but there also is rebirth and life. And so that's kind of the takeaway message, right? Be on the right side of history. Be on the right side. But in order to be on that right side, you've got to take action.
There you go. So, folks, take some action. First, go buy Joe's book. Go to builttosuck.com, because the key to success is to suck less. Simple stuff there, simple things you can do, but it's change or be changed. His company's the HMS Beagle. He quotes Darwin and all sorts of other stuff. He's Joe Jaffe, and I'm delighted that he spent some time with us today. Thank you so much, Joe. This was really great, man. I really appreciate you.
It really was my pleasure. I loved it.
Thank you very much, my friend.